started. I'm Andrew. I am the law librarian and manager here at the Fort Bend County Willie Melton Law Library. And so today we're going to talk about specifically introduction to legal research. Specifically, we're talking about resources. That's hence my and resources here, even though the series is on legal research. And the quote I always like to use, and I'm kind of showing my age, there was a great G.I. Joe show in the 1980s, cartoon, of course, but their slogan was always knowing is half the battle. So knowing what resources you have and what you have access to is half the battle of legal research, because knowing where to go and what you have is a big part of the whole thing. And of course, our disclaimer as usual, anything that I talk about in this is not legal advice, and it doesn't replace any advice of your attorney. But where to begin? Trying to get that thing out of the top out of the way, and then just, if you'd like to, yeah, please. Yeah, if it makes you feel better, that's fine with me. There we go. So where to begin? A couple things that I always recommend, and these are two things that I read. So just knowing a little bit about me, I am a librarian, but I did not study the law. A lawyer. I didn't even study legal research in my master's program for my library degree. Now I did study a lot of research, and a lot of the big part of getting a MLS or a Master's of Library Science is research. So I do have a background in research, but it wasn't legal specifically. And so when I took over this position 8 years ago, I didn't really know anything about legal research. So I am also proof that anybody that even doesn't have a background in the law can learn this. Now, I had some advantages, obviously, having a master's, but anybody can do this if they put their mind to it. So two resources that I use specifically when is called How to Research a Legal Problem, a Guide for Non-Lawyers, which, as you imagine, it's specifically geared toward librarians and pro se litigants, people that are representing themselves in court. And it gives a really good understanding of what resources are out there and how to get access to them. It's only about 5 pages long. It's written by the American Association of Law Libraries, which I am a member of. And so it's written by librarians for the public. And so it's a really good starter guide. The website address is here at the bottom. And again, when I send you the PowerPoint, you'll have access to that. It's just a PDF. You can download it. Really great information for you to read through. The one on the right is Legal Research in a Nutshell. It's more of an academic title for students, especially if they're going into law school. It's about 100 pages, but it also gives a more in-depth review of resources across jurisdictions, both print and digital, what's on the internet, all those good things that you have access to, and where to find them. And it's a really great book as well to read through. But again, legal research is a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of just, doing it yourself, sitting down at a computer, using a book. So while these are really good starter positions or good things to start with, ultimately you're going to have to sit down and do it yourself to get the most experience and the most confidence doing it. But like I said, knowing is half the battle. So this will get you a long way down the road. There we go. I can't talk today. Apologize for that. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, one, I want to talk about the background of legal resources. I want to talk about the different kinds of resources you're going to run into, both primary and secondary, and what's the differences between them, especially all the different types of secondary resources you're going to run into. We're going to talk about resources in print, specifically what you can find here in the law library. But also we want to talk about other resources you can find at the public libraries, the ones down your street, the different branches in the Fort Bend County Library System. So we want to talk about that. We want to talk about what resources are on the internet, especially the ones that are free that you can get access to. Now, there's a lot of misinformation on the internet, as you might imagine, but the resources we're going to cover are good quality resources, good websites that we trust, that we've already reviewed for you so that we know and you know they're good websites for you to look at. And we're going to talk about our databases and what we have access to here at the law library. And then finally, we're going to talk about just generally what resources we have here that you have access to, not only at my law library, but other law libraries around the area. So background and legal resources, typically there's really only two. There's primary and secondary. Now, there's a lot of different subcategories of each one. So like, for instance, primary law is typically three different things. And of course, primary law is the law itself. This is cases written by the judicial branch, opinions that have come out of those that have changed, because we are in a common law system here in the United States. So case law carries a heavy weight when it comes to the law. Statutes, of course, written by the legislative branch. I am having trouble today. I apologize. Anyway, so, state law, of course, written down in Austin, but also federal law that's written by the U.S. Congress. And then, of course, regulations written by the executive branch of government. So that includes the governor, lieutenant governor, the president, any part of the executive branch. So those types of regulations. So legal citation. So what's good about legal citation is we had to come up with a way for you to find case law and statutes when everything's kind of jumbled up. So that's where codes come into play, especially when you're talking about statutes. But case law is typically written in chronological order. So as you might imagine, trying to read cases as they come down from the courts, those opinions, if they're just filed as they come in, you're not going to find anything, right? So we had to come up with a way, and what we came up with, of course, is legal citation. But this designates one specific case or one specific statute. So looking at this as I've divided between Texas and federal, do you have any idea what any of these citations mean? Okay. So looking at Texas here, let's specifically talk about case law, is that under Texas here, when we're talking about the 11 here, that's 11. So the next part here is which reporter it's come out of. So in this case, it's come out of the Southwest Reporter, meaning the Southwest region of the United States, and the third edition of that reporter. So now you know what volume and what edition of the Southwest Reporter it comes out of. And then finally, we're looking at chapter or page number 328. And that's where that particular case starts. So now you know exactly where in the book to find it. And so we combine these legal citation with, sometimes we call it a digest or key numbers. And typically those key numbers in the digest are broken up by subject. So when you look for a particular subject, whether it's family law, criminal law, or some sort of subcategories of each one, it's going to give you this citation so that you can go to the books or go to the database and be able to find that particular case that some attorney has cited that says, under this subject, these cases are really prevalent in this area. And so that's going to be something that if you're representing yourself and this case supports your argument, you're going to want to cite that case that shows the judge, okay, this is my opinion. These are the facts of the case. These have already been, they're precedent and they support my argument.
The reporter is a...
Yes. So the reporters are a massive, large book set, and you can see them in the back of my library here when you're done. typically for the Southwest Reporter in particular, each edition is roughly about 1,000 volumes. So you're talking about books that may be anywhere from 700 to 1,000 pages each, and there's 1,000 volumes of them. So in the back of my library right now, I have roughly close to 1,000 books back there, if not more, because I also have the Southwest Reporter second edition, which covers cases roughly from the 1930s up to about 2000. And then the third series runs from 2000 to the present. So now the volumes have actually, encompassed 2 or 3 different books now sometimes, because there's so many cases being handed down now from the appeals court, the Texas Supreme Court, and so on. And what I have back there is just the Texas cases volumes from the Southwest Reporter. So as you might imagine, if we're looking at, 1,000 volumes just of Texas cases, you can already imagine how many volumes of the actual full Southwest Reporter there's going to be. But that just shows we have so many more people that we've got to make decisions on, right? So anyway, federal case law works very similarly. It's volume 432 of the federal second edition, and it's chapter or page number 1324. So that again is going to lead you to one specific federal case. So once you kind of understand the format and how legal citation works, it kind of applies across the board, whether you're what jurisdiction you're looking at. Statutes kind of are similar. Now Texas, of course, has gone a little bit different route and used a little bit different system. So they decided they were going to just abbreviate the name of the code. So Texas Government Code, and then this is a little section symbol there in the middle, and then 81.101. So typically, Texas it's Texas Government Code, Texas Education Code, the Water Code, the Penal Code, so on. And typically the abbreviation is pretty self-explanatory. You'll be able to have an understanding of what that is. And then of course the section symbol and then the specific code number. Now the United States Code is more similar to case law. Now the 28 is Title 28, not volume. But it kind of designates it's similar. And then USC, United States Code. And then your section symbol again, 2071. So that leads you to one specific code section of the United States Code. You have any questions about citation? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and once you don't need to memorize citation in any way or a specific citation, but as long as you can read it, it's like reading music, as long as you can read it, you'll be able to understand it.
And so when you search for something, search statute? I guess it depends.
It depends, yes. So a lot of times you're probably going to be looking, if you're looking for like statutes and codes, you're probably going to narrow it to the specific code. So like government code, that particular section, you may not be quite narrowed to a specific, code number when you're doing legal research. But a lot of times you'll know, like for instance, if I'm looking family law, I'm going to look in the family code, or even more broader, it might be civil practice and remedies code, where it encompasses all civil law, because there's going to be some codes that cover, that govern all of civil law, including family. And then there's some specific things that are just under family. So you're going to probably do it more that way, unless you have a specific code that you're looking up that you found that was cited in an informational resource online, maybe on Texas Law Help, which we're going to talk about. They might cite a specific code provision and you can look it up that way. But that's why we have citation, so it makes things a little easier. So secondary legal resources. Secondary resources are typically documents that interpret or discuss the primary resources. Now, when you're representing yourself and you're citing things that uphold your side of the argument, you're not going to want to cite these. You're going to want to only cite primary law because that is the law, right? But secondary resources are still a hugely important when you're doing legal research, and it's typically where you're going to want to start, because a lot of times, especially if you're self-represented and you're reading the law, you may or may not understand it, the way it's written. So secondary legal resources attempt to try to explain those resources to you. They'll cite, case law or code provisions under various topics that'll help you with your research. And so this is always a great place to start. And for all intents and purposes, are really, as far as self-help guides go, and for pro se litigants, there's really two types. There's the self-help guide, which is very general in scope, very broad, and it covers a topic like represent yourself in court, that covers many jurisdictions. It's not wholly specific to Texas. It's just a general informational guide written by an attorney that talks about what things you need to know about representing yourself. Self-help kits, for instance, are more specific. And although Texas Law Review is not really a good example of a self-help kit, I have some others that I'm going to show you here in a second. They're more guided to one particular topic, like how to start a business in Texas. So it's going to give you forms and information that allow you to get to a specific end. Yeah, and I've got lots of resources on how to start your own business. So resources in print, what are you going to find? These are just some general self-help resources, and here's in the middle there, how to start a business in Texas. You've got, your self-help guides here on the left, which are a lot of my Nolo guides that are very broad, very general. You've got your self-help kits in the middle that are very specific to one type of action, like how to start a business. And then finally, you've got like our Pro Se Handbook, which was all online now. This is just a copy of when we had a print version. This is going to be more direct forms and information on various topics. It's not specific like how to start a business in Texas, but it still covers various things. So like in that handbook, we've got, divorce forms, child custody, occupational driver's licenses. If you've got a criminal record, how do you, file a non-disclosure, an expunction, things like that. Transfer on death deeds, dealing with, probate. So there's a lot of those resources that are in our handbook that are more form guide specific, but they're closer to a self-help kit than they are a self-help guide, because each section is pretty specific to one particular action. Call numbers, we use Dewey Decimal System here in Fort Bend County Libraries, as well as here in the Law Library. So in the public library, you're going to find it between 340 and 349, typically, in the adult nonfiction section. Now, there are some that kind of go outside of that, but 90% of our legal books are going to fall between 340 and 349. Now, at the Law Library, although we use Dewey Decimal System here, I don't have anything in Dewey order, which is kind of anathema to some librarians. But my patrons don't search for them that way. There's a lot of people that come in, they don't really understand Dewey. My attorneys don't care particularly. So I break it up by collection. So I have all my primary law in one section, my self-help collection. I've got family law, business and transactional, probate and estates, criminal law. So I try to break it up that way. And all my Texas books are together and all my federal books are together. So that way it's a little bit easier for patrons to find, right? Do you have any questions about all the different types of secondary resources?
So are they on?
So the only one that's online is my Pro Se Handbook. Everything else is going to be in print format. Now, some of these you're going to be able to check out from the public library, because a lot of our public libraries branches here in Fort Bend County buy those books for you to check out. Now, my books are reference only. You'll have to make photocopies of them or scan them. Scanning is free. Photocopying, we charge 10 cents a page. So you have a couple options there on how to take it home with you. So public library resources, I do want to talk about what all the general Fort Bend County library branches have. They're going to have those self-help guides we talked about, most of those Nolo guides like Represent Yourself in Court. They're going to have the self-help kits, how to start a business in Texas, for instance. Obviously online, we got the Se Handbook, so that's going to be available to you. But like I said, it's mostly Nolo books. Jurisdictionally, it's going to be very general. It's not going to be Texas, unless, of course, it's how to start a business in Texas. That's very specific. They're going to mostly be just general informational guides. Obviously, you got access to our online databases, which I'm going to talk about. And then, of course, you have access to any free resources that are online, including primary resources like Texas Statutes, which, again, we'll talk about when I get to that part of the presentation. And then at George Memorial, which is our main library, you've got some print material, including annotated Texas codes, general form guides, a lot more than most of my other branches have because it's the main library. And then, of course, in a minute, we'll talk about what I've got at the law library, which is much more extensive than what the branches have. But when you're in a pinch, you know, or it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you need to look up something online, this is what you got access to with your Fort Bend County Library card, closer to home. So Nolo is a publisher. Nolo produces a lot of different legal guides specifically for self-represented litigants in various topics. So they can cover like very general, like represent yourself in court, but they can also be, you know, how to do your own divorce. They can also be talking about bankruptcy, probate and estate, like doing your own will. So there's a lot of, it encompasses a lot of areas of civil law and a little bit of criminal. But typically with criminal, you're going to get a court-appointed attorney, whereas in civil law, you're not guaranteed an attorney. They don't typically appoint you one. So it covers lots of different things. And I do recommend if that's a great place to start, especially because you can go to your public library and check out the book. So that's a great place to start. What do we have at the law library? Well, we really have a good working collection of Texas and federal materials. It is not completely encompassing, so I don't have a comprehensive collection, but for the most part, I have anything and everything you might need to get started. So this is just a selection of my print resources. And again, you don't need to read all this. I'll send this presentation to you. But as far as primary law, we're going to have anything in regards to Texas. So statutes and codes, executive rules, court rules, case law. We've got all that for you in print. I have some things in Spanish. It's very, very little, unfortunately, mainly because we don't really have an attorney part of our staff that is versed, that can speak Spanish. Now, Texas Law Help, for instance, has a lot of guides that are in Spanish. I believe some of the databases, and I haven't looked at it recently, they may have a translation option. I'm not 100% on that. But I do have a few resources in Spanish. I do have a Spanish language collection out here, but it's very, very general, unfortunately. Spanish has been incredibly hard to find legal material in Spanish. I do my best, but unfortunately, if you don't have an attorney that speaks Spanish, then you can't get it translated. Now, I do have a Spanish to English legal dictionary. So when you're reading a book, even in English, you can go to the dictionary and see what it would translate into Spanish so that maybe you have a better understanding of that particular legal term. So I do have that. And those are fairly easy to find. I've got a couple really good ones, including one that's specific to criminal law, which is extremely helpful. So my federal collection, is probably the smallest collection that I have, mostly focusing on bankruptcy, tax law, and criminal law. And that's a lot because here in Texas, we have the federal courts downtown, the Fifth Circuit courts. Texas also has a bankruptcy and tax law court for the Southern District of Texas. So I do have a small collection of that, including Supreme Court reports and the United States Code, of course. My other collections, we've talked a lot about the self-help collection, but I also have paralegal collection, lawyering skills. Although those lawyering skills are more designed for attorneys, that doesn't mean you can't look something up, like how to do a deposition, for instance. That may be helpful to you. And then my legal periodicals, I have a reference collection. We talked a little bit about my Spanish collection, and then just general interest. They're just kind of fun, entertaining stuff for you to read. And like I said, this is just a select resources. I've got more than this. And then, of course, you can photocopy, download, email any of those resources. Download and email are free. Photocopy costs 10 cents a page. And all this there, with the exception of the few things that I talked about earlier that are available at the other branches, all of these are going to be available only here at the law library. Oh, and I do have the legal databases there, Lexus and Westlaw, that we have access to. So where to start? I always say go to our law library page, mainly because we have a lot of curated resources on there that you have access to, including resource guides on various topics, family law, criminal law, probate and estates, and so on. The Pro Se Handbook is there, so all your forms and information that I have pulled from various websites, including Texas Law Help, other county law libraries in the state, that are all really good resources, legal aid organizations that have like a general informational guide. So I put it all in one place for you. Our newsletter, where we typically review, we have a tech corner, we have a featured resource column that we talk about specific resources we have and some tips and tricks on those, new and updated resources that we have, good articles that are available on the internet that might be helpful to you. So that's in our newsletter. Recommended websites, typically free websites that are on the internet that we've reviewed for you to make sure they're good resources. Our legal assistance resources are also available online. We also have it in print here at the desk. But these are things like, legal clinics, legal lines, how to find an attorney. Those types of resources are on our legal assistance resources. Links to all our databases and our YouTube videos, which I have, canned recordings of this class, including a lot of the others that we have that either myself or my assistant law librarian, Jonathan, gives. So those are all on my YouTube page, and there's links to them on our website. So searching the public catalog. So this is if you want to see what resources we have here at the law library or the public library have, and these are going to be specific resources, not just me saying self-help resources. So like, for instance, I just searched power of attorney. So you can search by subject on our website. So once you search for power of attorney, it's going to give you a list of books that we have in the system that are helpful. Now, it's a very general resource, and of course, it has a version of AI in there too, so it tries to do by relevance, but you can see the second source on here is a resource that probably won't apply. It's more of a general kind of like memoir type resource. But the first one here, for sure, Power of Attorney Simplified. Now, again, that's a general resource. As I mentioned, most of the public libraries are going to have very general informational guides, but that may be something you want to look at. Click on where is it so you know which branches have it. Now, of course, if your local branch doesn't have it, you can always put it on hold with your library card, get it sent to your local branch so that you can go check it out within a couple days. So those are all things that you can do when you're not at the library to see what resources we have. So searching on the internet, again, primary resources typically are all online. Federal resources, which include the United States Code, Supreme Court case law, opinions by the appellate courts, federal courts, those are all going to be online, but they're not annotated. And what I mean by not annotated is typically an attorney goes in there and he or she will cite additional resources to help you. Maybe it'd be an encyclopedia that talks about that particular area of law. Maybe it's going to be a form guide that lists a form for you that you could use. It's going to list some additional case law that talk about that area of law, whether it's in the annotated code or what have you. So online, it's just going to be the code. You're really typically not going to get any sort of annotations unless, for instance, which I learned at the recent conference that I was at. So like Georgia, for instance, includes all their annotations in their official code, where Texas typically doesn't. So that's, it varies state by state. Fort Bend resources, so anything that is given out by our clerk's office or the courts, they're going to be all online as well, and they're free and easy for you to access. Secondary resources, of course, be wary. There's a lot of misinformation on the internet. Primary resources are typically, you don't have a whole lot to worry about, especially if you go to a government website, so a .gov, so like the Texas statutes are on statutes.legis.state.tx.gov, something like that. Anyway, typically it's going to be a .gov website, so you know it's good. Secondary resources, of course, are not that way, as you might imagine, but these are some good resources that we have that you can trust. And again, under my recommended websites section that we've looked at, we've curated for you. Texas Law Help being the most important one of all of them, just because of the breadth of resources they have, informational guides and forms. But Tarrant County has a really good set of law library forms that are good throughout Texas, mainly because Texas doesn't have standardized forms, with the exception of a few. So if it's written by a Texas attorney, typically it's going to be accepted. Harris County Law Library has a lot of really good form packets that they've worked together with Texas Legal Services Center and the Texas Law Help website to create the packets, which I've included in the Pro Se Handbook, which is the next one. So we all kind of work together to create our resources that are available for the public. And then, of course, our databases are online. Any Fort Bend County databases, state law library, you can sign up for a free library card and get access to any of theirs. So again, these are all things you can get access to on the internet for free. But again, those are free. You just sign up for them.
Or the library.
Now, well, that one you can use to get access to any of our Fort Bend County resources that are available online. But you'll need an additional card through the Texas State Law Library to get access to their resources. But again, it's free. You just do it all online. So primary resources on the internet, again, these are things that you can find, that you can get access to with their websites address attached here. So Federal Resource United States Code, the Federal Register, Code of Federal Regulations. United States does a real good job of having their primary law on the internet, including their case law. So anything you find from these .gov websites are going to be absolutely worthwhile to look at, especially if it applies to your case. Now, there are some other websites like Justia, FindLaw, Google Scholar, which are going to have mostly federal, but it's got some Texas law in there as well. Those are good websites to look at, but again, they're a little bit behind when it comes to case law because of copyright and other things that limit the amount of resources they can put on their internet. Texas resources, again, these are all really good websites to follow. Secretary of State, the legislature, court rules, from the Texas courts, and then of course any case law from the appeals court and higher Texas Supreme Court. Their opinions are typically on the Texas court's website. When you get to trial court, it becomes, like Fort Bend, for instance, it becomes a little bit harder to find those case law, but you can do that as well. And there's a lot more than just this. This is just a selected listing that I put together. So Texas statutes and codes, statutes.capital.texas.gov. There you go. That's the actual website address. I'm searching for 81.101 like we did earlier. You can do a search on there. It's not the best. Typically, if you have a direct citation, you can pull it up this way, hit the little drop down boxes and everything. Now it's going to open a PDF document. And in your browser, you can do the find option, which is pretty good. But it's going to open a big, large PDF. But again, remember, it's just the code. It's not going to have any annotations to it. It may be hard to understand, obviously, legalese, that sort of thing. So that's when secondary resources come into play. But you do have access to it for free online. So searching the Fort Bend County court records, fortbendcountytx.gov, that's our website. And this is where you can get all the district and county clerk forms, search court records online, and this is for all the Fort Bend County courts, JP Court, County Court at Law, District Court. So you can get all those online and get access to those. There are some forms that the courts and the clerk's offices put out. You can get access to those on there as well that are specific to their court. Any court rules and things that apply to their courts specifically, you can find those on their websites as well. So searching court records, this is our court records research. It's not the most intuitive, but it's fairly easy to use. Obviously, you pick what type of records you're looking for, whether it's probate, civil, family, criminal. You can also look at the court calendars specific to each court if you want to see what's going on. And then, of course, you can search by cause number. So if you have a particular case number or cause number, you can search by that. You can search by your name or the attorney involved or the date it was filed. And then it's typically going to give you a list sorted alphabet or sorted in order by cause number that you can select the one that applies to you, whether it's your case or you want to do research, you can do that.
I have a case, but I noticed, I just briefly went into one of the resources and asked what does it mean according to your address, you belong to a certain.
That only applies when you're talking about JP Court. So JP Court is broken up by precinct. But as far as county court at law or district court, when you file an action, you're typically assigned a case, a court, I should say. And it's random.
You're just assigned. Okay.
Yeah.
So then when you go look it up, then that's when you need to know.
Exactly.
Oh, good.
No, it's only JP Court that's broken up by precinct and where you live. Otherwise, you're just assigned a court, once you file an action with the court. So Fort Bend County Court rules and forms. Again, I mentioned all these can be found on their website. Here's all our district courts and their access to those courts, their rules of court, their any forms that they've generated, informational guides they've generated. You can find on the district court page. Same with county court at law, county courts at law 1 through 6. And then our JP courts, precincts 1 through 4. There's actually 5 of them. Precinct 1 is broken up into 2 JP courts. And then there's a lot of forms on our clerk's websites as well. So texaslawhelp.org, this is what you can find on Texas Law Help. Again, I pulled a lot of these things for our Pro Se Handbook, so you can find them kind of in one place. But these are really good. It's mostly civil forms with the exception of expunction, non-disclosure, and occupational driver's license. You can find on this website. So it's mostly family law, but there are some like general court forms like notice of hearing, continuance, transfer of venue, that sort of thing. General information on a lot of legal topics for a lot of areas of civil law, probate and estates, business, family law, of course. So there's a lot of good resources there. These are all written by attorneys that practice in Texas, so it's good information. List of legal clinics and legal lines that you have access to, especially if you're low income. And then, of course, they have a chat service for low income residents as well to talk to an attorney for free. So the Pro Se Handbook, I've talked about this a lot already, but it is mostly, again, general civil forms that you can find online, but it also does include non-disclosure and expunction. But I've also included all the Fort Bend County forms that you can find, and then additional things from other websites, including Tarrant County and Harris County, that you can find in one spot. So the first 5 or 6 sections are generally Fort Bend specific. And then the other forms are going to be more Texas, general Texas forms and information that you have access to. And I'm adding to it all the time. So it's kind of a ever expanding resource that we offer to our patrons that you can look up online. Our legal databases, again, you do need a library card to get access to these, but there are 3 of them that you can get access to from home. And that's the Legal Forms Library from Gale, the Legal Information Reference Center, and the LexisNexis Digital Library. And again, now digital library is the only one that requires the password or the PIN for your card. The other 2 just require your barcode number that's on the back of the card.
What card?
Your Fort Bend County library card, yes. Not the state law library card. No, this is just our card. Yeah. So Gale Legal Forms Library, this has a lot of really good forms on various aspects of law that are pretty close to fill in the blank style. It has a good general search. You can search by topic, you can search by the name of the form, and it has a lot of general Texas forms. So that's a good thing too. So, jurisdictionally specific to Texas that you can use here in Fort Bend County. It's also got a lot of general U.S. forms like this one, General Power of Attorney, that you can download in Word or PDF or what have you, that you can start editing on the computer. So that makes things really easy. It does have a dictionary as well. So if there's specific legal terms that you're looking at home that you want a legal definition for, you got access to it there. It also has a browse section over various topics. Again, this is mostly civil, probably 95% civil. There may be a few criminal forms on there, but it's going to be predominantly civil forms, whether they're general or specific to a particular action. Legal Information Reference Center, going back to our Nolo books, this is where you can get access to them all as ebooks. And it's got some additional like American Bar Association guides that are pretty helpful. Again, these are all broken up by topic. You can also search for them, by topic, by subject, by title of the book. So let's say you went to the library and you couldn't get a particular general informational guide like Represent Yourself in Court. You can find them online through our Legal Information Reference Center. Now, these only download in PDF, so you're not going to get any forms in Word, but you can start downloading some of these if you didn't get access to them while you were in the library. Lexus Digital Library is more of a professional resource, but that doesn't mean you can't get access to them. This is when you need your PIN or password associated with your library card. But this encompasses about 40% of my print collection, my books that are sitting on the shelf. Now, it doesn't include any Texas primary law, but it does include all federal primary law, including Constitution, the United States Code, executive regulations, all those things. Any Lexus or James Publishing guides, those are 2 of my main publishers that produce a lot of legal material, including my Matthew Bender practice guides, which I give to pro se patrons all the time. Their sections are really organized really well by topic and by area of law. So like we have a federal law resource guide, business and transactional, a Texas litigation guide, probate and estates. So those are really good resources for you. The James Publishing guides, which kind of sets them apart is their forms are really close to fill in the blank. So you can kind of sit down and start using those almost immediately. Now they may take a little bit of editing, but not a lot. Now the downside to this website, of course, is nothing downloads in Word. They are ebook, so you can download portions of the book or copy and paste into a Word document, that sort of thing. But just let us know if you're struggling with that. You can always call us, email us, and we can send you the Word document of that particular form. American Bar Association titles are on this website, which are mostly general guides for attorneys, but you got access to those as well. Now, those books, the ABA books and the James Publishing, I've only got one digital copy, so you get those for 7 days, and then it'll automatically return them, or you can manually return them when you're ready, so that somebody else can get access to it. All my Lexus resources have unlimited checkouts. So you can look at it, whenever you want and not inconvenience anybody else. Now, like I said, you got to have a Fort Bend County Library card in your PIN for that. And you can actually download the app on your iPhone, your tablet, whatever, your Android phone. You get access to that way as well. So what can law librarians do? I always like to talk about this because I think some people come in and they have a different idea of what we can do for you. Well, what we can do is exactly what I'm doing here today, and that's explain how to use some of our legal research resources, talk about what we have and where to find them, locate particular statutes, especially if you have that citation. Now, even if you don't, you may have a specific reference to it, which we can help you with. Direct you to sources of law and resources, recommend books to you, and help you start your research. That's pretty much what we can do. Now, what we can't do, of course, we can't get legal advice. I can't interpret anything for you. I can't choose specific forms unless you've already told me. Now, I can use what we call the reference interview to kind of help you narrow down what you're looking for. But I can't just out of the blue say, oh, you need a divorce? Okay, here's the forms. I got to do a little bit of work to make sure that we're all, within the rule of law there. I can't state any opinions. I can't actually do all the research for you, but I can show you how to do it. And of course, I can't recommend any attorneys for you. Any questions about that?
Yeah. Only before that, you talk about investor tool. And then when often when I do that, I have the document, and when I search in the next thing, then I want to reverse to the more, and then they come up funny. They don't do exactly the same.
Yeah.
And then they come funny letter and straight.
Yeah, you may have to change how it's formatted
Yeah.
so that you can read it a little better. There's format options that you can do when you download it or view it to change the way it looks. Well, we can show you how to do that here in a little bit. Okay.
And also, sorry.
No, it's okay.
That you mentioned that I know that what you say I understand. You cannot tell us what to do.
Right.
But for the something, if something like me, you said, what can I do? What can I help with? Can I help you? Because people don't know what you can help, but they know they have problems. But if you say, and I will not say you, I say if you mean that we cannot help you, give you advice, this, that, it's just because we don't know. So that's why we need your advice.
This is why we give this class and we try to help you as much as we can, but there are limits to what we can do. I mean, I'm not a licensed attorney, so there is a real fine line that I can't cross, but I can do what I can to help you up to that point. Yeah. I don't know about that. I mean, I may know a little bit more about research. There's a lot of attorneys that come in here that, they have paralegals, they have legal assistants that do a lot of research for them. So the actual functionality of doing research, I may know a little bit more about, but the actual law itself, I certainly don't. So that's kind of the fine line we have to get at. So I can certainly help you find the information that you need. I just can't go all the way. So, any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming. That's my presentation.
Oh, come late.
Yeah, it started at 10 o'clock. Yep. Yeah. Sorry about that. Anyway, thank you very much for coming, and we'll we'll have another class next Tuesday.
Oh, you will?